The mission of the Dad Edge is to empower men to live and lead legendary lives. The Dad Edge empowers men to create legendary marriages, create epic connections with our kids, master our personal finances, optimize our health, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, that is, and become a leader within their family. On this episode of the KEV Talks Podcast, you'll hear more from Larry Hagner, founder of the Dad Edge, about the hardships he experienced by growing up without a stable father figure, how he began to gather those lessons learned, and how in 2015 he realized he could use some work himself, like all of us, at being a better father and a better husband, and found the power of mentorship. Larry shares communication skills that can improve our relationship with our kids and with our spouse. And as he and I talk about in this episode, the shared experience of having teenage sons that are now driving, playing sports, and how we as men can better connect with them. Thank you for connecting with the KEV Talks Podcast. For more, go to kevtalkspod.com. For now, please stay tuned for this outstanding conversation and excellent guidance that Larry shares with us on this episode 36, Helping Fathers Live Legendary. To find out more, go to kevtalkspod.com and also visit thedadedge.com to connect with Larry and follow his podcast, his books, and everything else that the Dad Edge movement is doing for fathers all around the world. Thank you for tuning in to the KEV Talks Podcast. This is the place where you'll hear people's compelling stories, you'll learn industry-leading best practice processes, and you'll find ways to make progress in your personal and professional life. Now, let's get logged in and get locked on to this episode of the KEV Talks Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the KEV Talks Podcast. I am very fortunate today to be joined by Larry Hagner, who is the host, creator of the Dad Edge, both podcast, mission, author. We've been trying to get together a few months. It's really good to connect. Glad, following your work and reading what you do and attending some of your courses to really get to meet you virtually. So Larry, thanks so much for being on the KEV Talks Podcast.
Thank you for having me, man. This is super fun. I appreciate, I'm honored to get the invite.
Awesome. The, kind of jumping into it, can you let us know that my challenge was the whole time difference thing? I'm East Coast and you're Central, and I don't know why that was so hard when I kept sending invites, but can you just, tell us, for folks that don't, aren't familiar with you, which I know tons of folks are, kind of where you're at, where you live and kind of where you grew up?
Sure. Yeah. So I live in St. Louis. So I've been here, I would say, like almost all my life. I've been more in, I was born in San Francisco. I lived there for a couple of years when I was little. I don't remember it, and then went to college, and then I moved away for just a couple of years for a job and a career, and then moved back. And I've been here in St. Louis now for the past 20 years back, and married, just actually 22 years, and then married. We just celebrated, my wife and I celebrated 20 years this past year, actually just a couple of weeks ago.
Awesome.
And 4 boys, 17, 15, 9, and 7. And yeah, I've been running the Dad Edge podcast since 2015. So 8 years. And yeah, we put on our own, summits and stuff like that. This year we're doing the Dad Edge Summit. Should be our 5th one. It's our 4th one. Thank you, COVID.
Gosh,
and,
yeah.
That's going on October 18th, 19th, and 20th. And been doing a lot of speaking, a lot of traveling lately as well. So just trying to help men optimize the relationships under their own roof, right? And the skills, most importantly, the skills to do that. So yeah, that's my shtick.
There you go. That's a great elevator pitch. I just did a short. I do these Foundation Friday episodes, and it's like 5 minutes or less, kind of quick tips. And one was the value of the elevator pitch, especially for project managers or something, to be able to the C-suite say, okay, here's the status, here's this thing, here's this decision we need, very quick. So that's a very practiced, very good, informative one. So yeah, thank you for that. And
yeah, of course, man.
The interesting parallels too. I have 3 boys, married 21 years. And I also do jiu-jitsu. I just saw recently started rolling too. You and your oldest. It's interesting and also awesome. I'd be interested to hear from you too, to have one oldest son that drives, opens a lot of gates for, hey, can you run to the store and do this? Or can you take your brothers to do that? Have you found that as well?
Yeah. So my oldest does drive. My 15-year-old, he'll be driving here in a few months as well. And yeah, it's pretty cool. It's terrifying at the same time. I joke around because we're not we're not car people. It's like it's not part of our core values. Actually, possessions and things are not part of our core values and how we make decisions in our family. We base a lot of our decisions off of connection, memories, adventures, experiences, and that kind of thing. But I will say this, just for context, my neighbor, it was the sales manager at the Jeep dealership that's here in town, and I've wanted a Wrangler since I was in high school. Like I've literally wanted it that long, and so I leased it, and so I didn't buy it because they're way too expensive.
Yeah,
I leased it, and the company's paying for it and all that. But I finally like have a car after 48 years, and now 30 years of driving. Finally, have a car that I've always wanted. But I will tell you this: driving that vehicle around, 6,500 pounds, it's an absolute monster. And, teaching my oldest son how to drive, I don't know if I ever yelled so loud as I did one time to tell him to stop the Jeep because he was about ready to plow into this Toyota Corolla that he didn't see had stopped in front of us.
Oh, wow.
And I literally like braced for impact that we were going to like demolish this car, because we probably would have not only hit it, but probably would have ran over it because my Jeep's lifted and small little car. But there's some terrifying moments, man, when these kids get behind the wheel, and you're just like, oh, yeah.
I'm surprisingly the calmer one, because I'm very much like a safety person, coming from public safety, and I kind of, my wife's similar to pumping the invisible brake, hitting that and things like that. I think fortunately, where I live in Southwest Virginia, it's not a crazy amount of traffic. Ours was, these windy little country roads, which are terrifying enough, especially when it's dark and all the deer. But yeah, for sure, it's both a blessing and not quite a curse, but a stress increaser.
Stress, yeah, for sure, man, for sure.
But it's helpful. That's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, and I've read a lot about you and followed you for a bit. And for folks, the catalyst for the Dad Edge was kind of you looking at you, right? Is that accurate? And looking around and saying, okay, how am I doing? And really, I guess saying I'm not doing well in some of these areas, in marriage and maybe yourself. And I, parallel that and relate to that as well. What was kind of the final straw, so to speak, to say, you know what, I'm going to start this movement via this podcast and other work, and then write the book to get both what you learn from experts, and then share that out into the world.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it just came from absolute struggle, to be honest. Dad Edge got started in a really dark moment, to be honest. And looking back on it, probably really started with my childhood. It goes all the way back. It wasn't like a profound moment just at fatherhood. That was more the tipping point. But I grew up in a very unique environment where, so my mom and biological father were married. They were married really young, like 1971. They were 21 years old. And they were together for 4 years, and then they had me. And then right after they had me, my mom and dad went through a really bad divorce, and my dad exited the pretty much situation. And, apparently he did visit me and pick me up. I just don't remember it. I was too little. Gotcha. And, but what I do remember is that, right around being 4 years old, because I think that's kind of like when the video camera gets turned on and you start, having memories and recordings and that kind of thing. But I remember being in preschool, and I remember dads coming to pick their kids up from school. Mm-hmm. And my interpretation is that moms go out and find dads. So kids miraculously appear by the stork probably, and then moms go out and find dads eventually. And my mom hadn't found my dad yet, which I was fine with. I didn't know any different. So I'll never forget being 4. And my mom pulls me aside on like a Friday afternoon after I got home from school. And she's like, hey, so I'm having a friend over for dinner tonight. He's a very special friend. And I want you to meet him. And I thought to myself, I was like, special friend. Wow. She must have found the dad, right? This must be the guy.
Right.
And so like he comes walking in my house, and literally like I thought this guy was my dad. Like, and I literally asked him as he walked in, the first thing I said to this guy as this guy walks in, he walks in this 3-piece suit, double Windsor tie, hair feathered, mustache, like 1979, carrying a briefcase, right? He was white collar data software engineer.
Gotcha.
And I literally asked him, I was like, are you going to be my dad? And I just remember like the reaction, like he just looked at me like in shock. And I think my mom like actually gasped,
right.
Yeah.
And,
but that my my mom ended up marrying the guy like 6 months later. I think and I don't really know if she ever really loved him. I think she more or less loved the idea and felt like maybe it was a sign. I don't know.
Gotcha.
But they were together for about 6 years, and it started off really cool. I didn't see him that much because he traveled a lot for work, but I did see him on the weekends, and it started off really good. But then every year they were together, it just got progressively just really bad. Like he drank a lot. My mom drank a lot. They fought a lot physically, emotionally, and verbally. They fought a lot. There were cops called to my house. Like there's a lot of drinking, a lot of abuse happening. And it was just a really bad situation. And then when I was 10, they got divorced, and I've never seen him since. And I started asking a lot of questions with my mom. I was like, wait, where did I come from? Like, I know he's not my dad. Like this guy came around when I was 4. And my mom dropped it on me when I was about 10, 11 years old. She's like, you actually have another father out there. I was married before. And I'm like, what? I had no idea. Right. She's like, yeah. I was like, well, where is he? She showed me like the wedding album. She's like, I don't know. I don't know where he's at. She's like, but this is a wedding album. This is what it looks like. And so a couple of years go by, and I won't go into it for the sake of just time, but sure. I accidentally met him at 12. And that serendipitous moment turned into a 6-month relationship. He only lived 3 miles from us. Had no idea. He was remarried, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And dude, I was just overjoyed. I was so happy. Like my real dad was in the picture.
Right.
And we did spend some time together. He would come to my little league games. I'd see him just about every week. And then suddenly, like right around month 5, like it just felt different. Something was off. Like he just was kind of colder, a little bit more distant, not really a whole lot to talk about. Even around him, like I couldn't really pinpoint it, but something was off. And then when I was I called him one day and I'm like, hey, you know what's going on? Is everything okay? And he just basically said, yeah, it's me. It's not you. It just, can't really do this. And I was like, wait, what? And he left again. And I think for him at that moment, it was too much, for trying to start a business, trying to start his life over, and, another kid on the way and all that other stuff. So a few years go by. My mom continued to date all these ridiculous, crazy men who were same guys, different name, different face, like partier. It became like this revolving door of just toxic men. My mom got remarried one more time when I was 19. And, but it was chaotic. It wasn't until I was out of college and I was in medical device sales and I was 30 years old. So I'm fast forwarding a lot, but this is where the story kind of culminates. I was in a coffee shop for a business meeting at 30 years old. I had been married for 2 years. I had my first son on the way. I'm sitting there sipping coffee at a business meeting, and who came walking in for his coffee but my father?
Dad, yeah.
I had had not seen him since I was 10. So I'm sorry, 12. So it'd been 18 years. And that serendipitous moment turned into a relationship that we have had now for the past 18 years. So still married to the same woman. I have 2 younger half brothers. We get along fine. But here's what I'll tell you about how Dad Edge got started. All those experiences of abandonment, all those experiences of just being abused. Like I was like, man, there's going to be 2 things in my life I'm going to get right. And that's marriage and fatherhood. And I wasn't doing either one right. I was falling on my face left and right. Yeah. And basically looking back on it, I didn't know what I didn't know then, but I had a laundry list of things of what not to do, but I had no clue what good looked like. It's kind of like you go to Home Depot, you buy your barbecue pit, and it gives you the instruction manual and says, here's 100 ways not to put this thing together. Otherwise, you're on your own. Right. That would suck, right? But that's the way it felt. But Dad Edge really got started because my 15-year-old was 4 at the time. My 17-year-old was 6 at the time. And I had a really bad day at the office, and I had a really bad day that day. I lost my number 1 customer in medical device sales, which was going to impact our income for the next 18 months to 2 years. Right. And it really sucked. And there's a lot of other things going on. Like our marriage wasn't really great at the time. And I was really beating myself up pretty poorly. And I made one promise to myself as a father. I'm never going to strike my kids out of anger. And the night that Dad Edge got started, I broke that promise to myself. I'm not here to fight the fight of whether it's right or wrong to spank your kids. I just want to tell you, I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And my 4-year-old stepped out of line as any 4-year-old would.
Right.
And I lost my cool and I spanked him on the bottom. And unfortunately I spanked him and he lost his footing and he fell.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? And I
Right.
immediately recalibrated and I went to go pick him up. And this is what really was the turning point. He looked at me and put his hands up and shuddered like he was terrified of me. And I was like, that hit me so deep in the heart because that's how I was when I was a kid. Please don't hit me again.
Right.
To these guys who were like this. And I was like, that's it. That's it. I don't know what I'm doing. And I just admitted to myself, I don't know what I'm doing. No clue what I'm doing. I'm so tired of not knowing what I'm doing. What would it be like if I learned what to do? Like, what if I actually just treated this like anything else? Like you mentioned jujitsu.
Yeah.
You can either try to, if someone's trying to attack you, you can either go primal and wing it, right? And hopefully you'll know what to do, but you'll make it up as you go along. Or you can go to the dojo and learn how to roll and defend yourself. So when danger does strike, you're like, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what to do that's going to give me a better chance or a fighting chance. You're more relaxed, you're prepared, you're ready. What did I do to prepare for fatherhood and marriage? Nothing. I wasn't doing anything to sharpen that skill whatsoever. So I just surrendered. I'm like, I'm going to go out and learn something new every single day. And out of that came the blog, came the podcast, came everything we're doing. I wish I could tell you it came out of like this beautiful divine moment, but it was dark. It was horrible.
Right. Which seems to strengthen for a lot of folks, for you in particular, like the resolve to then do better, to learn from those things, to also then want to share that knowledge. Cause you can, thinking about some of the episodes you've done and things of, what's it like to be probably on both sides. You've got dads in the group of, to be the man coming into that situation where the father has left, the biological father's left, and then vice versa, the biological father that has left. And I would imagine as you gathered these in your head, just like the grill instructions, the barbecue instructions, that helped you set up, these are areas not just for me that I can focus on, but then build out and say, hey, everyone, here's a guide you can use whichever side of this thing you're on. Cause it was a lot of great points that you had and that you have in the programs. But I think also, like, I don't know many men that have a manual, right? That's like, hey, here's how you can be a good father. Even if they have a really good father, it's different when you're that person. And then same thing for a husband. Here's what a husband should do. We can get some of that. And certainly, some folks probably get more, handoff and discussion, from their parents than possible, or than, you did, it sounds like, and a lot of folks do. But yeah, it seems that hardship really helped to drive kind of the passion with what you do, and you can kind of hear the lessons or the focus of those that could build. Oh, you know what? I have, this library that isn't awesome that I don't want, but that I can take and spin. And it sounds like that's when because you've talked about mentorship and the value of that a lot. Sounds like that's when that kicked in for you to say, hey, like, we need mentors, and don't think you can just do it on your own.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think I was told this, and it's so true. I mean, you mentioned, jujitsu, right? Or you mentioned martial arts. Mm-hmm. And I think the same rules apply for every single thing that we do in life. So one of the guys that work for me, he is also just an incredible mentor of mine as well. So his name's Jake Herbert. He's like an American wrestling legend. He won the silver in 2012. Wow. Was shooting for the gold. He was America's gold medal in 2016. Like he's an American wrestling absolute legend. He's been doing it his whole life. Wow. And unfortunately he had a horrible upset in 2016, the very last match at the Olympic trials, and did not make the Olympic team in 2016. It was gut wrenching for him. So he retired at 31. Like, he was an older guy, but he was going for the gold.
Yeah.
But he told me, I was like, we've had so many conversations, because to get to that elite level, like, he was a 9-time national champion, and wrestled ever since he was like 6.
Right.
And I was like, what were some of the best lessons? I asked him, I was like, Jake, what have been some of the best lessons you've learned just about life? And he's like, I had so many things. He's like, but one thing in particular, he was like, if you want to be successful, you have to have 3 people in your life at all times, in every area that you want to. He's like, in your wealth, your fitness, marriage, parenting, business, all of it. Like, you have to have 3 people in each one of those areas. And I was like, who are the 3 people? He goes, someone who's mentoring you, someone teaching you, someone who's ahead of you, right? So like, he's like, if you think about it, like, he's like, I'll go to wrestling, right? I have my coaches, right? Or I had somebody who had been wrestling longer than me that would teach me how to do things better, more effectively, more efficiently. So I had someone teaching me. There's the mentor. He goes, the second person you need in your life are the people that you go to battle with, the people you're learning with, the community that you are learning this skill with, right? He's like, we have this in other areas and some we don't. He's like, think about it. Like church, we listen to the pastor, we're a part of a congregation. And then if we do service for that church, we're probably teaching something, or we're leading something, or we're doing something, right? And that comes to the third person. The third person in our life is we need to be teaching it to the people who are behind us. He's like, because when we teach it, we truly master it. He goes, so somebody teaching you, somebody doing it with you, and someone you're teaching. You have those three people in your life, in marriage, finances, fitness, your business, all of these things, parenting, you're going to do really darn well. You're going to do a lot better than people trying to do it on their own, which that doesn't usually work out very well for most.
Which is a great point. And that's one of my Achilles heels, is thinking, oh, I don't have time to put the extra to go to these mentor sessions, or to your point of jiu-jitsu, it just happens. Like that's the byproduct of, being there because of all those folks you mentioned, an instructor and your classmates and the new folks that come in. But in other areas, like, how do I get better as a professional, as a husband, as a father? I think it's easy. And I'm probably not alone thinking, oh, either don't have time because I've got to give that time to somebody else, or think maybe, oh, I'm good, I don't need that help, I can just read this thing real quick and not actually go through those motions. I know that's something that I found. And then, in the past few years, realized like that's totally not true. You can get so far and you have to take the initiative. It feels like I have to go sign up for something. I have to attend something. But so even if I go kind of halfway at something, but to then get into those three folks, those three types of folks, you have to, I think it sounds like, give yourself permission to ask for help and get help. And then also realize, like, I need to carve time out for me as much as I want to be there, to your point, as a great father and a great husband. Have you found a lot of folks in the dad age groups that, same thing, like they just didn't and finally like, okay, I did. And oh my gosh, it's been so much better trying to do it on their own for so long.
Yeah. It's almost like the majority of the feedback that we hear all the time, like, so when someone joins like our mastermind, right. And they're like, where has this been all my life? Like, this makes life way easier. It makes it way more fulfilling. And I know what to do, when to do it. Like, that gives us an insane fight. I mean, it's no different than, I want you to just think of everybody in your audience, and for you and I just to have this discussion, to think about it like this. You're out somewhere, right, with your wife.
Right.
Suddenly there's a guy that approaches you and maybe he's got a knife, maybe he's got a gun or whatever, right? I know that sounds extreme.
Right.
But this guy pulls something on you and he's like, give me whatever, or I'm going to kill your wife, or I'm going to kill you, or whatever. If you do not know what to do in that situation, that's a problem, right? That's a huge problem. Versus the guy who's taken training, like I did Krav Maga for a while, so we learned how to disarm people and fight our way out of corners and that kind of thing. So, and I've done 15 years of martial arts on top of all that. And so, like, if someone were to happen, like, I'm not saying like I'd come out of that unscathed,
right?
Like, there's a good possibility I might get hurt or killed,
right?
But it's actually less likely. The odds are more stacked in my favor that I can defend myself than if I hadn't learned anything at all.
Where the violence just totally locks you up.
Yeah. And here's this is the tipping point for guys, right? And you mentioned, which by the way, on the surface, it all makes sense, right? So like, well, I don't really have time for that. Or, I can just do this, read this thing. Like if I read a book on how to disarm somebody, like, and I've never actually done it.
Right.
Well, good luck. Even if I just read this thing or listen to this thing, that's not going to help me. Right.
Right.
Usually what happens, and this is unfortunate, is in our relationships, it usually shows up with the guy who's got a gun in our face saying, if you don't give me all your money, I'm going to kill your wife, and you don't know what to do. But the way that shows up is your wife turns to you and says, I don't know if I love you anymore. Yeah. And I don't know if I really want to be a part of this relationship anymore. and you're like, wait, what?
Right. Talk about
And
shocker.
shocker, right? Or it's the teenager that doesn't want anything to do with you
Mm.
because you haven't put in the reps for conversational excellence, asking generative questions, creating an environment of psychological safety where your kid wants to tell you everything, even the things that they failed at, the things that weren't pretty and the things that were good. So we don't think about not going to the dentist for years. Many of us go to the dentist once a year or twice a year, right? We don't think about like going 25,000, 50,000 miles without an oil change and we're scratching our head why our engine blew up.
Right. Right.
But we will do that in our relationships. It blows. Now that I'm on the other side of this, it blows my mind that people wait. Like it actually infuriates me, to be quite honest.
Right.
Like, or if a guy, is starting to get breadcrumbs that his marriage is not going in the direction that he wants, but he's like, I'll just wait it out. I'm like, dude, you just went to the doctor and you got a checkup. Your cholesterol sky high, your blood pressure is out of control, and you're 25 pounds overweight.
Right.
But you're going to wait until the heart attack hits you before you do anything about it. That's crazy to me. Right. And this is where I really want to rattle the minds and hearts of men. It is so much easier on us, on our families, on our relationships, on life in general, if we approach everything we possibly can with a proactive wellness mindset, not a reactive crisis situation. Because the last thing I'll say about this too is if you wait until a crisis emerges, and this is what we always tell guys, like the guys that come and do life with us in the group, like I'll ask them like, how are things at home? And a lot of times guys will be like, things are pretty good, man. But what I'm really wanting, I don't want pretty good. I want freaking awesome, dude. And I'm willing to learn how to make it awesome. Right. I'm like, dude, you're in the right place. Right. Yeah. And in fact, it's those types of students that do the best versus the guy who then knocks on our door, wants to join our group and says, guys, my wife just moved out and I need to get her back. And we can help those guys and we have helped those guys. But here's the difference. You can't think logically or even rationally when you are in a state of absolute disparity. And I'll give you an example. If you flip on your light and a spark happens and you're like, oh shit, I better call the electrician to take a look at that. You call, hey man, can you come over and look at this light switch? Something happened. Like, I just need to make sure there's no fire that's going to happen. Yeah, no problem. Right. Comes over, he fixes it. Everybody's calm, right? Versus I'm just going to wait on that.
Right.
Flip it a few more times, a week goes by, a month goes by, all of a sudden house goes up in flames. Then you're frantically calling the fire department as you're trying to grab every single thing, every human being and every valuable possession that you possibly have so it doesn't burn down. And you're screaming at the fire department to get there as quickly as possible. That's the difference between those two scenarios. You can't think as clearly or as rationally when you are in a spot of disparity, even in your relationships. So if you want to do the right work and the good work, be proactive about it. Don't be reactive about it.
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, your emotions are just roller coastering when you're reacting. And yeah, as we know, and as every human has been, those emotions will make you make some horrible decisions or, ones that just don't make sense. And then you look back and go, why did I do that? And you can't. And you mentioned the, relating, not dealing with, but relating and building relationships, especially with a teenage son. So this one hits too, because I've listened to you talk about, there's these generic that we all know, like, how was your day? What, all those kind of things when they come home. And it's like, no, let's ask a different question that kind of makes them want to talk to us. Cause that's just such an off the shelf question. So trying to get in there, what was your favorite thing about this, or just a really more kind of inquisitive question. What are a couple examples of those that you would suggest for folks, with their teenage kids, but, sons, we both have sons in particular, but kind of for an example. So, whether they're coming home from school or I guess two examples. One, kind of you see them when they get home from school, and then another, they've played a sport. Because I think as dads, and if anyone's ever been to a youth or high school football, you see the superstar dads that were pro players, of course, yelling at the refs and the coaches. And I say that sarcastically, right? Of how horrible they are and stuff. So I can't imagine what that feedback for their child is like.
Sure.
But what do you suggest kind of one thing for the, you see them after a day and then you see them after a sporting event?
Yeah, so I'll give you three questions and the psychology behind them, and I'll preface this with a kind of a funny story. So we have a team, that takes a lot of our like small tiny clips and puts them on social and that kind of thing. Well, my team grabbed this clip of me on a podcast, much like this, and I stated to the guy, and I was in a very foul mood when I was on this podcast. So I was really direct and blunt and all that. And it was because my best friend and my business partner within Dad Edge 6 months ago tragically lost his daughter in a car accident where like literally I've known him for 6 years and his 19-year-old daughter was killed. And I had this podcast the next day and we were all just devastated.
Yeah.
So I was in this like very snarky, kind of foul, upset, sad, angry, type of mentality. And this guy asked me a very similar question you did. And I told him, I said, if you're asking your kid how his day was or how her day was, that's the shittiest question on the planet, and here's why. It's a shitty question that's going to get you a shitty answer. Good, fine, busy, crazy, boring.
Right.
It requires zero thought of us to ask the question. It requires zero thought for them to answer it. And it creates, it doesn't create what we truly want in that question. Here's what I'll tell you. It's a shitty question, but the intention behind the question is beautiful. Yeah. Because guys really want to know, how was your day? Like, and that's a way of us as men, like, talk to me, son. Right. Talk to me, daughter. Right. Talk to me, son. For you and I, it's talk to me, son. I just want to talk to you. Right. So the intention is there. The intention is like, man, I just want to talk to my kid. Right. I just want my kid to talk to me. But that's not the question that's going to open up that lever. And I will tell you, that video, I think, was viewed 3 million times. Wow. And it had like 1,900 comments. Right. And about 80% of them were good. Like, oh man, I haven't thought about it like that. I'm going to ask. And I explained in the reel, like, these are the 3 questions you asked.
Here it is. Yeah.
But I had some people just completely like lash out. They're just like, well, that's a genuine question. Like, come on, how was your day? Is a genuine question. And it's not the shittiest question on the planet. Or I had some guys say, yeah, but I could ask that question and they'll roll their eyes at me. They won't talk to me. Well, I preface all that because I'm going to give you these 3 questions. And I want men to know, and I want people in your audience to know, as soon as you start using these questions, you might, the skies might open up and you might have a beautiful conversation right out of the gate. Nice. Or you might have your kid look at you like, what? Why are you asking me that? Like, are you on drugs, Dad? Which is fine. Either one is fine. But when guys get that response of like, wait, I thought he was supposed to open up to me. If you've been asking, how was your day for 5 years? And you suddenly vary it up, your kid's going to look at you like you got 2 heads. Just be prepared for that.
Take a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So here are the 3 questions and here's the psychology behind each one. And I vary them up in very different ways. What was the best part of your day? Right. Or I'll say, tell me about a day that you're proud. Tell me something that happened today that you're proud of. Tell me something that happened today where you were kind to somebody else. Tell me how you were helpful for somebody else. I'll vary that question up several different ways, but the psychology behind it is what I'm trying to do is get that kid into a state of a high point moment, something that they're happy about, something they're proud of, something they have gratitude for, and they want to share it with me. Because think about it. Like if somebody has good news to share with you, or you have something like, yeah, dude, guess what? I got to tell you this. Right. And sometimes those things are not on front of mind unless we are prompted. Right. So if I ask my 9-year-old or my teenager, like, dude, like, what was the best part of your day today? Like, tell me what you did. And sometimes for my 7-year-old, my son was like, it was PE. Now, normally like us as parents be like, well, of course it was. What else happened? I'd be like, no, dude, like what happened in PE? What happened in PE?
Oh, you'll dig into it.
Right. He's like, Dad, I did 12 push-ups. I got 3rd place. I got 3rd place. And he was on cloud 9. I'm like, nice. Dude, you rock, man. Nice job. But that through that question, what I'm really looking for is I want him to tell me something he's proud of, something he's excited to tell me, because what that's going to do is that's going to raise our connection. It's going to elevate his connection to me. Like how cool is interested dads are interesting. Interested dads in the day are like, and they're sharing in that energy. Suddenly dad is like the freaking coolest guy in the world to talk to because he's like, you can tell that dad's proud, he's happy and all these things, right?
Great point. Yeah.
So that's the first question. The second question, and a lot of parents will be afraid of this one, but I love this question. I actually love it for several reasons. There's 2 psychological reasons. What'd you fail at today?
Mm.
What'd you learn?
Yep.
Right now, I like that question. Or tell me something that was insanely challenging today, and how did you get through it? Now, what I want, and there's a couple things going on in that question. Number one, I want to get my kids used to the word failure,
Right.
right? Most people don't want to try something new, do something new, and they certainly don't want to admit to their dad what they failed at. So the whole thing about failure is like, hey, failure is a tool. Fail fast, learn fast. That's what we say in this family all the time. Be okay with sucking at something in the beginning, right? But what are you learning, right? And then being able to be like, hey, here's what I failed at. Because the rest of us, our generation, we were terrified for anything failure, right?
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes, depending on the parent, it's ingrained in us. You cannot fail. Failure is unacceptable. Well, failure is unacceptable if you don't learn from it, right? But if we learn from it, then we can evolve, grow, change, be better. So if my kid goes, ooh, Dad, I got a D on the science test. Now, I want him to articulate that, be like, oh man, I bet that took some courage to tell me. So tell me more. What happened? And here's what I want. That question and that welcome mat of failure, I'm creating something that I want to get rep after rep after rep after rep. And that's creating an environment of psychological safety where my kids feel good about telling me the stuff that they're not so happy to tell me, but we need to get those reps in. And I'll explain why here in a minute. So he'll be like, hey, yeah, I got a D on the science test. Oh man, I bet that took some courage to tell me that, huh? Thanks for telling me that. So tell me,
nice.
What happened? And he'll be like, I don't say, what do you mean you got a D? Why did you get a D? I say, tell me more about that. Because one is accusatory, you suck. The other one is like, let me in. What's happened? And they will usually tell in full ownership. They'll be like, yeah, Dad, like I didn't really study as well as I should have. Well, it's good to know.
Right.
So let me ask you this. If you were to do the whole thing over again and you had the opportunity to take the test again, what would you do different? Mm-hmm. Be like, man, I probably would have studied, especially chapters 5 and 6, because I neglected those. And that's where most of the questions were. I probably would have prepared a few more days leading up to the test. I might even have actually taken time before the test, like gone off in the auditorium for lunch, not be at lunch with my friends, and just review some things. I'd be like, dude, like that's awesome. Like, when's your next test? And they'll be like, that's Friday. I'd be like, okay, well, that's next week. So, I mean, it sounds like you've learned a few things of how you'd be better prepared, right? Like, well, yeah, I did. Well, great. You going to do that? Yeah, I think I will. I think you got a plan. I think you learned. Like, let's do that. Is there anything you need help from me on? Do you need support or accountability? Like, no, I think I got it. I'd be like, all right, well, here's what I'm going to do. Like a couple days before the test, I'm just going to check in on you. Just make sure that you're doing what you basically articulated you said you're going to do. Is that cool? He's like, yeah, it's cool. And that's how we create the environment. Now, the reason I want to do that every single day is because, Kevin, there's going to come a day where our kids are going to be at a party. Mm-hmm. And it could be they tried something, they drank too much. The person that drove them there drank too much. And now they're holding their phone and they're like, I need to call my dad.
Right.
But he freaks out when I give him bad news. So I think I'll just drive myself home. I don't want that.
Right.
Be like, the guy that I can always go to when things aren't so good is him. He'll come pick me up. We'll have a conversation about it, I'm sure, but it's better to be safe. So that's that. And then the final question. So that's, what were you most proud of for the day, or what was the best part of your day? What was something you failed at? What'd you learn? The third question is this: what are you most excited about tomorrow? Now, if they say something along the lines of like, man, I've got my cultural geography presentation tomorrow in front of the class. I have gone over that so much. I'm so prepared for it. And I'm really excited to get it done. And I'm really excited to do it. Man, it's awesome. So what do you think I'm going to ask him about as soon as I see him the very next day?
Same, the first two questions. Yeah.
But I'm also going to be like, dude, and how'd the presentation go?
Sure.
Like any time you can continue a conversation on, because if I don't, he just shared that with me about it's a big thing. And if I don't continue and check in with that, it doesn't really show that I'm interested. It just shows that I'm checking the box and just asking questions. But this is conversational excellence at its best. And there's a psychology behind each one of those questions.
Sure. And it sounds like the whole approach is both you're empathetic, but you're also kind of objective and coaching more than you're consulting. So it's like,
100%.
I'm not going to tell you what you should do. I'm going to ask inquisitive questions, which for kids, let alone, I imagine the same psychology works with your spouse, and it works at work. Like at work, I'll do that with team members instead of like, well, I did it this way, and here's how that this should do, and use this thing. It's like, well, how can I empower you to do these, or what do you think? With some kind of suggestive question, but again, not you should do it this way. To your point, not getting upset when something doesn't go right, because that's life. Of setting someone up for giving them coaching and letting them figure it out kind of on their own, where we're then the wall they can kind of break against if they get stuck, and say, oh, well, I don't know. And then I would imagine if they don't come up with that plan, then do you still try and kind of stick in that inquisitive, the questions that kind of lead them to their own answers, as opposed to, again, unless they're totally stuck, then as dads that are older than them, just saying, look, I see you're stuck, let me just give you this suggestion on how it happens, and then let them figure out the rest of it.
Oh man, 100%. I think so I love asking questions. Like that's my number one leadership skill, right? Is
Nice.
Being able to ask really deep questions so they can be the ones that articulate their plan and their solution and the things that they've learned. Because I always have to like fight the urge to lecture, because you see the answer as clear as day. But here's the other thing.
Yeah.
If they don't see the same answer that we do, chances are, and I've experienced this, and I'm sure you have too, a lot of times they have a better one, or one that's going to work for. And if they're the ones articulating like whatever it is, they're more likely to learn it and stick to it and do it than me just talking to them. Now, there are times where, like, so my oldest son right now, he's in this program called CAPS, which is, so he's let off like every day, a half day of school, and he goes to like this organization where he learns how to run a business. It's awesome. It is like the coolest freaking thing. They are teaching him things in this program that they do not teach in school, which I love. So I could tell like last night, because he's like, Dad, he's like, I really need some help. He's like, I've been tasked with starting my own business. I'm like, okay, cool. What do you got to do? He's like, here are the rules. I have $10 to start. I can't take anything from you guys. I can't use any of the resources here or anything like that. I literally have $10 to get this business up and running. And I have until the end of September to make $100 out of this.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty cool challenge.
It is. And I'm just like, dude, I was like, you have no idea the gold that you're learning right now. Right.
Right.
So I asked him so many questions, right, to get him to a point. Right. And we talked for like probably 45 minutes. And he was getting excited, but I could also tell like there was like the feeling of overwhelm that was looming, that was coming. And then we kind of got to the point about 45 minutes into the conversation where we had created, basically what he's going to do is he's going to create a car washing business. Cool. So he made a list of the things that he'll need, like his sponges, his soap, his buckets, like all these things. Right. And then we started getting, and you could tell for him, it was just like, there's a lot to think about. Right. And then we got to think about advertising and all this other stuff. And then I was just like, okay, let's think about it this way. How many jobs do you have to do in order to cover your first $10 of expenses and all this other stuff? And you could tell we had gone through so much. He was just spent. Right. Like we went for like 45 minutes to an hour creating like what we were going to do. And he just kind of like looked at me. He's like, Dad, I don't know. He's like, I need to create like I think what I need to do is create 3 basic level car washes of like, this is the basic, this is level 1, this is level 2. And he's like, and then I got to figure out like who's going to buy what. And like, you tell he's just getting in the weeds on it. Right. And I would ask him questions like, okay, well, what's the right next thing we need to do? And you could just tell he was just like just a deer in the headlights.
Hard to get there.
Like, Dad, I'm smoked. Right. And I'm like, why don't we do this? Why don't we just put some detail around what does the basic car wash entail? And he's like, it's the outside of the car. So, okay, great. What's level 2? He's like, the outside, the inside, that's it. And I'm like, okay, what about level 3? And he's like, outside, inside, tires, windows, dashboards. And I'm like, sounds like you got it. But you could tell like he needed a little bit more prompting and a little bit more leadership. So like the regular questions weren't really working. He just needed some help. And I think you can kind of detect that in your kids when they're going through stuff like that.
Help them break down to Smaller bits, the whole
Yeah.
how do you eat an elephant thing. Yeah, that makes
Yep.
total sense. Because it is, I mean, even for adults to go, let me solve this whole thing instead of like, what's the immediate problem? What's the
Yep.
EMS term triage, and what's the immediate need and things like that. So
You got it. Yeah.
to compare, and I know we're coming up on time, and so all that discussion with a son, with a child, right? A teenager. What are like a couple key differences? And there's way more than that, I know, with your spouse, but in the way that you can coach, because now it's another adult, right? It's not necessarily a new human that's learning these things as they grow. What are the two kind of key differences, or even three, or that you then translate maybe a similar core skill set of talking with someone and relating, and again, not telling them, because you telling a spouse is very different than you telling a child,
Sure.
with like your wife.
So it's interesting you say that. So if you really look at the three basic needs of our wives when it comes to communication and connection and just feeling really fulfilled in the relationship, it's
Mhm.
seen, it's heard, and it's safe. Luckily, our kids, boy or girl, they have the exact same needs, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about survival needs of like food, shelter, clothing. I'm talking about the
Right.
relationship needs, seen, heard, and safe. For a man, it's respected, appreciated, validated, right? So let's just get that out there. The the skill set for communicating with your wife and your kids is somewhat similar, but obviously you're talking to an adult. So you're not
Right.
talking to a kid. And you definitely don't want to talk to your wife like she's a kid, right? We don't want to do that. But here's what I'll tell you. Some of the same rules do apply. So like, for instance, I'm a big proponent. Have you actually ever YouTubed It's Not About the Nail?
I don't think I have now. I should do
It
that. I'll write
is,
that down. Yeah.
it's one of the funniest 1 minute and 41-second videos on YouTube that really just paint the picture for how a conversation between a man and a woman usually goes. So
Gotcha.
it's hilarious. It's this man and woman, they're sitting on a couch and you really can't see the woman's face in the very beginning, but they open up the video with like, it's like this horrible pain. It's like right here in my head and it's throbbing all the time. And I don't know what to do about it. I just don't know what to do about it. Like, it's just driving me crazy. And like I can't sleep at night and I don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden the camera turns to her and she's got a nail sticking out of her head. And you see the look on the guy's face and he's like, well, you do have a nail sticking right out of your head. And she's like, it's not about the nail. And he's like, really? Is it? Because if you pull that thing out, like you'll be fine. Right. So she's like, it's not about the nail. You never listen to me. He's like, no, I think I am listening. And then they go back and forth and back and forth. But basically, if you really look at the theme, that is a very common conversation between a man and a woman, because a woman will talk about her feelings, good or bad, right? Overwhelm or happiness or whatever, right? But let's just talk about overwhelm for a moment, or
Sure.
being upset. What most of us do, and again, I want to go back to intention. When a woman communicates like she's overwhelmed, upset, angry, or sad, we immediately want to start talking about solutions. Let's get through
Right.
this problem. And here's why. We don't do it because we don't love her. We actually do it because we love her.
Yeah.
We do it because we want to take her pain away. We love her so much. We don't want to see the nail in her head. So we're just going to tell her how to pull it out.
Right.
But that's not the intent of a woman and I stress this, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time. So what a woman really needs to feel is seen and heard. So there's a part in this conversation where the guy gets so frustrated and he finally looks at her and he goes, that sounds really hard.
Mm.
And she's like, and she melts and she's like, it is really hard. And then she puts her hand on his and he's like looking like, is that
No.
all I had to say? Like, so
Right.
anyway,
Hmm.
when I'm talking to my wife, I use a skill that we teach called, labeling her emotions, right? All of us as dads, or I'm sorry, husbands, we want to be better listeners. We want better intimate conversations that feel connection. A lot of times for us, our interpretation of connection is, let me take away your pain. Let me solve this problem. In her world, it's, I just need you to hear me. And I need you to send the messages that you are hearing me. So when we say, like, I'll give you an example. When I come home, and I know this sounds systematic, but it absolutely is the thing that my wife needs. So let's just say I come home and she's like, oh my God, today was horrible. Like the dog threw up everywhere. Colton has been a nightmare. He's been misbehaving all day. Like, and he even like dropped a glass of milk and it shattered all over our floor. It scratched our wooden floors. The milk, like, went everywhere. She's like, and I feel like I've been cleaning up puke and milk all day. And the old me would have been like, it doesn't really sound like that big of a deal. Like, I'm sure like we can buff out the scratches. And I'll take the dog to the vet tomorrow. We'll be fine. Why are you so upset? And my wife would probably look at me like, what the hell's your problem?
Right. Yeah.
Instead, I globalize, normalize, ask for more. And I'll show you what that looks like. That sounds overwhelming. So I globalize it. I don't say you sound overwhelmed. I say that sounds overwhelming. So I say the situation is overwhelming, not you, because people are get ashamed, if they feel anger or sadness or overwhelm. They don't really like being seen in that way. But the situation, that's okay. So I'll be like, that sounds overwhelming. And then I'll normalize it by saying, man, who wouldn't be overwhelmed? If I was in your shoes, holy crap, I probably would have lost my damn mind. Right. Tell me more. The third step is tell me more. I don't say, why are you so upset? Because then everything I just did, like, man, that sounds overwhelming. Who wouldn't be overwhelmed? But why are you so upset? That doesn't land well. Out.
Yeah.
But if I say, tell me more about what's going on, and then I invite her just to talk, that's when she's like, oh, like, I just love you. Right. And even if she's venting, and even if I could be like, I know exactly how we could solve this really quickly, it's not my job at that moment. My job is just to hear her. But that's a great point. That's how we do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's my wife and I do similar, do you want me to solve this or just listen?
Yeah.
And then I apparently wasn't listening because there's a third option too, but I can't remember what it is. But yeah, similar. And it is such a game changer because my mind goes right to boom, okay, here's solutions and here's that. And the value you get back just from opening your ears and closing your mouth sometimes is huge. Which I would imagine is, a challenge. I know it's been a challenge for me and challenge for other folks, especially if you're in the type of person you're in the business where you solve problems all the time. You're like, oh, this is snap, 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 boom. And your example, I'll have to look up. It's not about the nail. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's hilarious.
And then share that. That's cool. Great tips. Discussion and everything. I appreciate your time. Folks can get way more than this by going to thedadedge.com, right? And that's the hub for everything. You've got the podcast, 3 books, right? The Dad Edge book and a couple more. Daddy will always be here to protect you, and Screen Time, the good, the bad, the ugly. Man, that's so relevant these days, right? And that's the battle that, especially coming off summer into the school year. We did our, drills the week before, like, okay, we're going to get off a little earlier each day, and then we're going to go to bed closer to your school time and get up early. And, it's paid off a bit, but that screen time piece, is huge. I imagine there's been a lot of response to that one, in the past few years, or, as long as smartphones have come along. Is there kind of, an overarching message that you want to leave folks that are listening, particularly the dads, right?
Sure.
Not just to find you, but some good direction for them.
Yeah. I would just say, I just kind of double down on what we were talking about here in the beginning, which is, this proactive approach to keeping these skills very sharp, right? We have, and this sounds very self-serving, but I believe in it 100%. We've got our mastermind program, which helps men in those areas. So we help them with marriage, what we call conversation, communication, excellence, connection, excellence, elevating the intimacy with your wife. You do that by, having better conversations with her, knowing how to communicate with her, knowing her needs. And we teach guys how to do that. Also being a more patient and resilient and a better leader as a father, right? For boys and daughters. So leadership and parenting is a big one, as well as being a better fit financially. So we help men even with personal finances, creating a vision for their families, and also just health in general. So physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. It's a big hub for us as well. These are the areas, quite frankly, as men, we neglect these. We just sort of leave these. It's really unfortunate. We leave these to chance, right? And we don't even go and get, we don't learn communication skills, but we'll go get our teeth cleaned. And what I want to tell men is, if you don't know exactly what to do in those areas, is it like, man, I just want to connect better with my wife? Well, chances are you haven't sat in the dentist chair for a while, right? And you don't know what those skills are. Be proactive about it. Go learn and implement it. Life becomes exponentially easier when you know what to do, when to do it, versus the other way around, when you just walk around clueless and you don't know what to do. And we see this all the time, unfortunately. It's like 5 years go by and a guy will get an urgent message from a guy, be like, I should have joined a year ago. My wife just told me she's leaving me. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, we could have really got in front of this. Right. But be proactive with your learnings and skills.
That's a great point. So everyone listening, proactivity beats reactivity.
Yeah.
And whether you're a man or a woman listening, ladies, if you're listening, send your husband to thedadedge.com maybe before, it gets to that point that Larry just mentioned. Thank you again for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Great to learn from you. Excuse me. Look forward to following more, learning it, and myself taking more of the initiative to get deeper involved so I can make myself better as a husband, a father, and an individual. So Larry, thanks so much for the connection and for being on the KEV Talks podcast.
Hey, you bet. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey everybody, this is your host, Kevin Pennell again. I hope you enjoyed that interview and discussion that I had with Larry Hagner, founder of the Dad Edge. He puts out some great stuff. I've attended some of his online trainings. I highly recommend it. So again, go to thedadedge.com. There you can connect on all the socials. You can apply for a couple accelerate or mastermind programs. You can be a member of the Dad Edge Alliance. There's also training courses, just great resources that Larry's involved in, and he's built a lot of good things that help all of us. Really, they help us ask better questions of our kids. They help us be more present with our wives and take care of ourselves, and we deserve that, dads. So thank you for making this podcast deserving of your time. To hear more great interviews that I've had with folks, please go to kevtalkspod.com and just search for whatever topics. Primarily, we do public safety, project management, but I've talked about wellness. I, like Larry, realized I needed to align my physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being after going through some hardship and hard times. And I'm sure some of you have too. So go to kevtalkspod.com, go to thedadedge.com, be proactive, make a difference in your life and the lives of your family. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff that helps the show grow. And I'll get more stories out there and share more of my life experience. And hopefully it can help some of you as well. Godspeed, y'all.